Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the three of you. The unanimity that you represent by being here together is powerful and inspirational, and I want to thank you, along with the members of the committee, for your leadership and your service. I, too, hope that, and will do my part to ensure that the politics in this important policy debate we're having end at the water's edge. And again, your presence here today makes that statement loud and clear. Secretary Clinton, if I could just follow up on Pakistan, do you have any concerns that the July 2011 transition date sends a message to the Pakistanis that we're going to leave the region, that we're not committed in a long-term way?
Well, again, I think that the messages that are being heard by different audiences are consistent with their perspectives. And as Senator Lemieux seemed to imply in his question, there is a lot of concern in Pakistan about what our commitment means, both in terms of whether we put more troops in or not, whether we leave them in or not. The Pakistanis understandably worry that our actions in Afghanistan increase cross-border efforts that threaten them, which they are not obviously in favor of seeing increase. So we have worked very hard with our Pakistani counterparts to explain that we have a long-term commitment to Pakistan. We are not going to be in and out the way we have in the past. We want to be partnering with the Pakistanis. We want to be supporting their democracy and their development. And that is independent from Afghanistan, but that we have unfinished business in Afghanistan, and that requires us to take the steps which the President has outlined, but that we also are asking for more help from the Pakistanis to go after al-Qaeda and the leadership of the Afghan Taliban inside their own territory.
So in an ideal world, we would get the job done militarily in the short term. In the medium and long term, we would have a presence in the region economically, diplomatically, and politically.
Well, as we have with so many other countries, obviously we have troops in a limited number of countries around the world. Some have been there for 50, 60 years. But we have long-term economic assistance and development programs and many others, and we think that's a likely outcome in both Afghanistan and Pakistan, that we would be there with a long-term commitment.
Let me turn, if I would and could, to the civilian surge. I had a close friend who follows what's happening very closely, and he said, who's going to be in charge of the civilian surge? And I've heard some discussion of an ISAF commander, civilian counterpart for the civilian efforts that we're going to put forth. Secretary Clinton, could you speak to whether there would be an official who's in charge of the surge and what sort of authority that person might have?
Well, we are actually discussing that with our allies. That's one of the issues I will be talking to them about in Brussels. You know, there's a United Nations presence in Afghanistan. There is also the NATO ISAF presence. Not everyone who contributes civilian aid is a member of NATO or ISAF, but they all are members of the United Nations. So how we coordinate and better hold accountable our civilian aid is a matter of great concern to all of the contributing nations, both the troop contributing, non-troop, civilian, non-NATO, et cetera. For example, Japan has just announced a significant civilian commitment of $5 billion. They're not a member of NATO. They don't have troops in NATO ISAF. So we're looking at the United Nations, we're looking at NATO ISAF, but we're going to come up with a coordinating mechanism that can meet the needs of all the various parties who want to contribute to Afghanistan's future.
And Secretary Gates, Admiral Mullen, I assume that General McChrystal understands the importance of that handoff and that coordination.
Nobody wants it more than he does.
Let me turn to the Secretary and Admiral Mullen. Given that this increase in the troops in Afghanistan will occur prior to the official drawdown in Iraq, what effect do you see this additional deployment having on dwell time and the length of deployment cycles and reset, and then the services required to take care of our troops, both here at home and in theater.
Senator, not just tied to this decision, it's something I think that we watch very carefully and have for the last several years, and what is happening in the Marine Corps. And the ground forces obviously absorb the brunt of these deployments. What we've seen happen in the Marine Corps is actually moving out to almost 2 to 1. They're like at 1.5 to 1 right now. We want to get to a point where they're home twice as long, the 2, as they are deployed. And that in this deployment cycle, General Conway thinks he'll be able to continue to progress out in that direction, with the exception of some of his smaller, more critical enabling kind of capabilities over the next year or so. On the Army side, we're actually making progress as well, moving away from 1 to 1, not as rapidly. And with this deployment and decision, we expect it to probably take a couple more years to get to a point where he's out to 2 to 1. The Iraq drawdown is taken into consideration in all this, and that we're still being able to gradually improve, although extremely concerned about the continued pressure, stress, and strain that our ground forces, our military, and our ground forces in particular, and their families have gone through. So we're paying a lot of attention to that. General Casey sent a note to the Secretary yesterday saying, and re-emphasizing what he'd said before, that this can be managed. Certainly there are challenges associated with that, but he's comfortable that he can lead his Army through this at this enormously important time.
Thank you.